Test, test, test. Hello, Luke, can you hear me? Everywhere?
collective grief.
Members, members, if we can have your attention, please, for some housekeeping points before we start the live stream. Although I should say, Pete has just asked if we could start with a moment's silence for the national team. Right, I'd remind you to make sure that mobile phones should be kept well away from the mics, ideally in bags. That will reduce the risk of interference with the signal and the quality of the sound. Obviously, the acoustics in the hall give us some challenges, so could you please speak directly? Now, behave yourself, Derek. So could you please speak directly into the mics so people listening to the live stream can hear you clearly? And you'll remember the note from the clerks that your papers should have been downloaded beforehand so the Wi-Fi can support the live stream. For the same reason, please don't connect to Wi-Fi during the formal board meeting. Obviously, no problem later on for the informal board business session. And just while we're sort of gathered together, a brief kind of personal thing. I've been very, very grateful for all the questions that I've had over the last month since I was diagnosed with prostate cancer back in December, had a major operation in February, and first Munro Lochnagar just last weekend, and a couple of days ago I got welcome to this formal board meeting of the Cairngorms National Park Authority. My name is Sandy Bremner, the board's convener, and this meeting is being live streamed. Welcome to members of the public who are watching or listening to our proceedings online, and a very warm welcome to the representative of the local community council who's joined us here today in person. We're delighted to be meeting again in the Victoria Hall in Ballater. This is part of our commitment to take meetings around the National Park. Our next formal board meeting will be convened in Strathdawn. It's especially appropriate that we're here in Ballater at a time when we're stepping up work to develop our next National Park Partnership Plan. This is a village that's still living with a sense of dread when there's a forecast of prolonged torrential rain in the hills. We all know what happened when Storm Frank led to the flooding of hundreds of homes and many businesses here. So our partnership plan will be more than just a document to this village. It'll be seen as a critical commitment to build on all the excellent work already underway, to mitigate against the growing threats from floods and droughts, to speed up and scale up landscape level work to hold more water in the upper catchment. Now, obviously, we're still in the early stages of developing the plan, but we're committing to continue working closely with all our partners, especially the land managers who have a vital role to play in delivering results. And we'll be making sure that similar work continues to be delivered in catchments right across the national park. Communities are looking to us to show the same ambition and vision that we demonstrated in tackling the threat of wildfires. We'll be consulting all communities and other partners later this year on the draft partnership plan. It'll aim to address some of the biggest challenges facing people and nature across the national park. We are really looking forward to having these discussions and to getting responses from the Ballater Community Council and others across the area. Moving on now to our formal proceedings, we have apologies today from Bill Lobban. I'll now ask the clerks to take a roll call.
Jiva Blackett.
I'm here.
Sandy Bremner.
Good morning.
Jackie Brereton.
Good morning.
Peter Cosgrove.
Good morning.
Kenny Deans.
Good morning, I'm here.
Paul Gibb.
Here.
Hannah Grist.
Good morning.
Russell Jones.
Morning.
John Kirk.
Morning.
Laura McCallum.
Good morning.
Eleanor McIntosh.
Here.
Ian McLaren.
Morning.
Fiona McLean.
Morning.
Duncan Miller.
Morning.
Anne Ross.
Good morning.
Derek Ross.
Here.
Mike Williamson. And Steve Micklewright is on his way.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 2, approval of minutes from previous meetings. Are there any points of accuracy on the minutes from the 27th of March 2026? None. Thank you very much. We'll take that as an accurate record. Item 3, matters arising not covered elsewhere. So action points for a meeting on the 28th of March 2025. Paper 2, the 2025-26 Budget and Operational Plan, point 1. Information on the number of ecological barriers that are being removed on catchments to be sought and circulated to the board, and thought to be given to putting this into a staff member's forward work plan. This is now complete. On the Spey, there are 3 barriers with projects for easement underway. Passage at the Spey Dam is currently being reassessed, and 2 small barriers remain on the Markey Burn and Milton Burn, although the latter does have a bypass channel. There are 4 obstructions on the Dee and 2 on the Don. One of the obstructions on the Dee is a fish trap, where the River Dee Trust is in discussion with Marine Scotland on minimising any impacts on migration. The Park Authority works closely with the Rivers Trust and boards and supports initiatives to remove barriers. This is a core part of staff operational activities. Action points for our meeting on the 28th of November 2025, paper 1 CEO report at paragraph 8.1. CEO to seek an update on the development of a Cairngorms National Park app and circulate this to the board. This is complete. For budget reasons, the scoping and creation of a new visitor welcome app for the National Park was predicated on it being delivered in partnership. That's with the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority and Visit Scotland. Unfortunately, the Loch Lomond and Trossachs website project has been delayed on 2 occasions, with a new delivery date in October. once this is up and running, we'll resume discussions on a potential National Park Visitor app. Separately, discussions have taken place with Aviemore and Glenmore Community Trust and Highlands and Islands Enterprise about creating an app for the Aviemore corridor as a proof of concept for the Cairngorms app developed on the same platform. The Aviemore and Glenmore Trust have submitted an expression of interest to Highlands and Islands Enterprise to explore if funding is possible, and the Park Authority have brokered a conversation between our developers and the Trust. Paper 3, Active Cairngorms. At paragraph 16.1, Head of Visitor Services and Active Travel to keep the board abreast with developments with Transport Scotland on installing signage on their train carriages and at train stations. This is complete. National Park welcome signage already exists in all stations within the park. Any other non-rail service related signage is considered as advertising and is sold on ScotRail's behalf by a commercial advertising sales company. This is not considered a viable approach for longer-term signs, but it is being considered as part of the campaign messaging around the new fire bylaw. Action points for our meeting on the 27th of March 2026, Paper 1 CEO report at paragraph 6.1, Head of Visitor Services and Active Travel to review the remaining unimproved section of the path between Inverugulas and Inch, assess whether further improvements are required, and report back on whether additional work should be considered. Again, this is complete, and there is a bit of an update here, if members will bear with me. The relevant section of path was one where the local group, Inch Community Holdings, owned most of the land and were initially proposing to carry out improvements themselves. But due to some of the constraints that had to be overcome, it was agreed that the Park Authority would take on managing the project. The sections either side were not in such poor condition and weren't highlighted as a priority by the community. And as they involve multiple landowners, if negotiations were to take place to extend the project, it was considered likely that this would be unable to be concluded in time for the project to proceed during the financial year in which funds had been set aside for the improvements. This doesn't preclude further improvement projects in this area being considered in future. These would be assessed against other path investments required across the park when work plans are being developed. Point 2, CEO to circulate the link to the land management, land guidance in respect of the fire bylaw to a board member. This is complete. Point 3, Director of Nature and Climate Change to circulate the data captured in Nature Scott's 10-year review of Capercaillie special protection areas when available. Complete, and the data was circulated to board members along with the analysis of this year's LEC count. That shows an increase from last year's count from 143 to 184 males. Paper 2, Cairngorms National Park Authority 2026-27 budget at paragraph 11.1, Deputy CEO and the Director of Corporate Services to continue close monitoring of inflationary impacts on staffing, procurement and delivery costs, and report any significant budget implications through the Resources Committee and to the Board. This is in hand. As things stand, there have been no significant variations so far with the budget, and the latest inflation figures in May are broadly in line with budget assumptions. Point 2, Board Convener and CEO to engage with Cairngorms Business Partnership to improve coordination and communication of available external business support and to explore clearer signposting tailored to fit different business sizes and sectors. This is complete, and just to confirm, this was discussed with the partnership's chair and CEO when we met on the 11th of June. Paper 3, Cairngorms 2030 Communities Fund Risk Register at paragraph 16.1, officers to update the risk register to strengthen mitigations on transparency, communications and panel retention, including trust and facilitation dynamics, and 2, officers to reflect the authority's risk appetite for participatory democracy explicitly in future board reporting. So these are complete and both actions are reflected in the paper for today's meeting. Moving on to item 4, declarations of interest, and none have been received in advance. As ever, with regard to item 5, paper 1, members are asked to note the provisions set out in the board memo for the meeting. That said, are there any declarations of interest? Well, none. Thank you very much. We're moving on to papers and item 5, paper 1, CEO report and convener update. This is for information and it's introduced by Grant Moyer, CEO. Grant.
Thank you, Sandy. Morning, everyone. Yeah, I'll highlight just 2 or 3 bits in the paper. So just to highlight that the Climate Adaptation Fund has successfully put out its offers to different people, and I think there's a really good spread across different projects this year. So we'll be able to do some good case studies on that as we progress over the next year, and also getting it done so early this year gives people longer to implement that before the end of the financial year as well. So that's certainly been a good thing in terms of that. Sandy mentioned recently that paragraph 4, the rise in the Capper lek count data is obviously just 1 year of data, so but it's good news on the Capper front, which we need, and it does show that the emergency plan is starting to have an impact, and we'll see how that progresses over the next couple of years. The next part I was just going to mention, which is linked to the fire bylaws at paragraph 16, which is just to give a bit of an update on numbers. Now, we are still quite early in the introduction of the bylaw. It only came in on the 1st of April. But to just give you, this is the data from the 1st of April till last Sunday. So if you take the equivalent data in 2024, there were 86 fires or barbecues that the Park Authority dealt with. In 2025, there were 34, and so far this year there's been 6. So you take that over the 2 years, it's sort of 91% decrease across that time. I do hasten to add, it is quite early, as in we're only 3 months in. It could be as much to do with variations in weather and other things as well, so we've got to take account of that. But obviously we've got the school holidays coming up next, but the data's showing that it's definitely having an impact in terms of the messaging around that, and I think it's really good news so far. But we'll obviously give a much more comprehensive report probably at the November board meeting, when we've got all the information at the end of the September bylaw, and we collate all of that as we usually do for an end of season report. But it's really good in terms of that. And I think if you look at the overall comms side of things, there's been a huge amount of comms around the bylaw, lots and lots of really good coverage. Far beyond our usual channels, we've managed to get into the right places. We were hearing yesterday that quite a lot of our work on Snapchat has gone very well with younger audiences and such like. So we're now moving into a different phase. So we had quite a big impact at the start. We then took down the amount of messaging as we sort of I suppose we're in a slight lull between Easter and coming into the summer holidays, and then obviously we're now progressing back up with that in terms of, as we move into the summer holidays, a lot more of that. And the joint police and ranger patrols on Deeside and Glenmore also start very soon as well, so we'll be doing some PR around that over the next week as well. So there's a lot happening there and some really, really good news stories. I think that was all that I wanted to point out, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. I have to say the communications effort on the fire bylaw has been exceptional, quite incredible. Questions or comments on the paper, members? Okay, Anne Ross.
Thank you. Good morning. We've seen the success of the Capercaillie numbers increasing with males. What's caused the success? I know there's been a lot of work going on, but why have we seen such an increase?
Well, it's probably quite a complex answer to that. I think there's a whole range of different things going on. We've obviously now in, I think it's year 3 of the diversionary feeding at quite a large scale within the area, and I think that's probably having quite an impact at last, so I think that's a good thing. I don't think you can point at one factor. I think it's the fact that there's habitat work going on, there's the removal of fences, there's the grazing in the woodlands as well that we've got happening at fairly large scale. There's the diversionary feeding, and all of that hopefully collectively is doing something towards that. I would just hasten to add it is 1 year data, and I think, you know, if we see a pattern over the next 2 or 3 years of a maintaining increasing number, or even a sort of steadying and a small steady increase, I think that would be further evidence we're in the right direction. But it's a good stepping stone, I'd say, this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Williamson.
Thank you. I was just wondering, with the talk of a ban on social media for youngsters, whether we're looking to amend our social media presence or communication strategy to accommodate a potential ban for youngsters.
I don't think we've probably thought about that yet, Mike, in terms of what we're looking to do in that. I mean, in essence, we're probably not aiming at that age group particularly in terms of under 16s, but it's certainly something we need to take account of over the next year, is that if that comes forward in terms of different changes in the law and such like. So yeah, we'd have to look at that, but we don't have anything just now.
Thank you. Chief Blackett.
Yeah, thank you. On the back of Anne's question, really, the diversionary feeding, is there any evidence or is it being monitored to see if other predators are being drawn in? Because if you provide pine martens with jam sandwiches, they love them.
I don't think we're hanging out the jam sandwiches yet, but yes, there's lots of monitoring going on around that, and there's been some really good peer-reviewed papers on it as well over the past 2 or 3 years. So I think that's all in place in terms of long-term monitoring and quite a lot of them got camera traps on them as well, so we know exactly what's coming across that time. But I should just say the diversionary feeding is for a specific period of time during the breeding season, so it's not full year round, it's for a specific couple of months and then it goes away again at that point, so it shouldn't have the longer term impacts on predator numbers in terms of feeding them in times of less plenty.
Thank you. Steve Micklewright.
Yeah, Grant, amazing kind of virtual media sort of coverage for the park over this time, which is just amazing and brilliant. I had a question, we might need to come back another time, but I know that AI is starting to affect traffic to websites and stuff like that. And are we going to do any analysis about this AI revolution and how it might affect the accuracy of people getting information about the park in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a big issue in terms of the role of websites versus, as in where you store information versus how you put that out to people. Yeah, it's certainly something that I know that Ollie and myself have had a couple of conversations about. I think there's probably more work for us to do on that in terms of for the future. So it's probably one that I can't give you an exact answer on at the moment, but it's definitely something that we're aware of. And even now, I mean, we've got AI in our website, so it provides all the summaries of documents that sort of come forward on the little bits that you see when it says what's in this document. So we're all using it. I suppose we're all still finding our feet to make sure we're using it in the right way. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the report? Russell Jones.
Yeah, thank you. Really good news about the fire bylaw, and the rollout's been great, and well done to everyone concerned with that. I just wondered, has there been any, has anyone been fined yet? I mean, what sort of communication has there been between rangers, police, and what's happened there?
Yeah, so I can say the police have been excellent, actually, really, really helpful in all the circumstances we've had so far, and I know that they are involved in 2 cases at the moment. We don't, so it's not at the moment because it's not a fixed penalty fine. It's if you like, it's got to get taken through, and it's other people that decide whether a fine is applied. But they're certainly involved in a couple of cases within the park. But they've been brilliant in terms of both the training they've provided for the rangers and the feedback and helping us with all the processes around this. The police have been really, really helpful, both on both sides of the park as well.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? Thank you being done. We'll move on to item 6, paper 2, Cairngorms 2030 Communities Fund. Now, this is for discussion. The board is being asked to review the risk register, identify any gaps, and agree the overall approach to this piece of work. The paper is being introduced by Ailey Todd, Communities and Rural Development Manager, Bridget Trussell, Community Grant Manager, and David Cameron, Deputy CEO and Director of Corporate Services. And David will lead off on this.
Yep, thanks very much, Convener. This is the third of the detailed updates on the development of the Cairngorms 2030 Communities Fund that we've brought to the board. As we've set out in the paper from a risk management perspective and our project approach, under our strategic risk management, we've adopted a relatively open risk appetite for this project, and that recognises that the project itself is seeking innovation in areas of citizen participation and participative democracy. So that implies a really quite open approach to risk management. That means that we are willing to accept a degree of risk in pursuit of these objectives within the controlled limits of our risk management approach. And that's why we've now come to each of the last 3 board meetings to give you regular updates on where we are at with our risk management within that overall umbrella of being relatively open to risk in this project development area. We're coming to the end now of the design phase, and we are now moving from design into the delivery phase. The paper in front of the board presents an analysis of our risk management to date, and I'm pleased to say with the great efforts and the work of Ailey and Bridget and the team, the risks that the board have been considering to this point have been very well mitigated, and we've had a relatively successful design phase. And I'm going to hand over now to Ailey and to Bridget to give you, I've done all the risk stuff. I'll give Ailey and Bridget the opportunity to give you all the detailed information, the exciting stuff that's been happening around the project development. So Ailey, I think, is picking up first.
Thanks, David. For those I haven't met, my name is Ailey Todd. I'm the Communities and Rural Development Manager and Project Lead for the design phase of this project. As David mentioned, this paper follows on from the 3 previous board meetings in which the process was outlined, risk register established and updated respectively. At the last board meeting, we updated on the successful co-design panel recruitment and the kick-off of the co-design panel meetings. As a brief update, as of Wednesday evening, the panel have now completed 9 sessions covering 36 remunerated hours, plus an additional 2 hours of interspersed reading time. They have now completed the co-design process. I'm not going to read the risk paper to you, but I did want to highlight the risks which have now been mitigated and the new risks as we head into the next phase of the project, which is bringing that design into operation. Risks that have been fully managed are risks 11, 12, 13 and 14, now that that design phase is complete. New risks are highlighted in numbers 17 and 18 and are presented along with the updated project risk register for discussion. At the Audit and Risk Committee last week, a couple of risks were highlighted, which I thought worth mentioning today, including transition both internally from design to operations and externally for the panels themselves concluding that co-design process. Mitigation of the internal risk is actually fairly visible today. Whilst it has been mostly my face that you've seen presenting on this, Bridget and the grants team who will be delivering the operational work have been embedded from the very start. They've been a really key part of that co-design process, bringing in their expertise when requested and helping to steer the co-design panel. Externally, the current co-design panel members are able to apply to be part of future work. Before we begin to work through the slide deck, which you all have on your table, it is worth highlighting that this process concluded on Wednesday evening, which is why these slides were not available in advance of this meeting. The printed element is also due to the tech issues already covered, and apologies for the natural amount of paper rustling that is about to commence. On slide 2, there is a recap piece. As we know, Cairngorms 2030 overall aim is to be the UK's first net zero national park, which we'll achieve through the 4 themes that you all know well at this point. The co-design panel have chosen the same themes to underpin this fund, namely that all projects funded will fit into one or more of these themes. Moving on to the priorities piece, we have highlighted there the key elements that came from the co-design panel themselves. What we're taking forward is the 2-year fund timetable with a small, medium and large tier. Bridget will give you more detail on each fund tier shortly. The decision making for the medium and large grants will be undertaken by a newly recruited and remunerated funding panel. On that timetable at the bottom of the page, you can see the small grants launching at the end of next month, along with the recruitment for that funding panel. That decision was taken to keep up the momentum of what has been achieved thus far. Training for those panellists is inbuilt, and you can see the regular panel meetings interspersed with a full communications and engagement campaign. This concludes in September 2028 to allow the Park Authority to report to National Lottery Heritage Fund. For the details of that decision-making panel, they're laid out in slide 5. In short, a single diverse panel of 11 individuals from across the geography and demography of the National Park. Recruitment will follow a similar mechanism to the co-design panel that we have already achieved, and crucially will be assisted in that from an external party to enable to ensure transparency. Crucially, panelists will be recruited for who they are, not necessarily previous experience, which is one of the innovation points of this programme, and to ensure that this is an open process following that principle of widening participation, which is so core for Cairngorms 2030, and support in training is inbuilt for those members. Moving on to equity, diversity and inclusion, the co-design panel have retained the 10% minimum value of the fund that was requested from us by NLHF, with application support and targeting in the comms campaign built in for those that have not previously accessed funding. One of the key elements here that the panel developed was a specific question at the bottom of this slide to determine whether a project is wholly designed for those experiencing barriers, or if it is open to all and therefore targeting EDI in that mechanism. Shifting on to the more operational side of the fund, I'm going to hand over to Bridget to give you an overview.
Thank you, Ailey. Good morning. I'm Bridget Trussell, Community Grants Manager, and I'm the project lead for the delivery phase of the C2030 Communities Fund. So I'm going to start from slide 7, talking briefly about eligibility, and then I'll move on to the operational side of how the grants team are looking to deliver what the panel have said that they want to happen next with this funding. So all grants, as you can see, will be subject to the same eligibility check, which will be undertaken by grants team prior to decision. The first of those is that the project fits within a C2030 theme, and those are land management to benefit nature, empowering communities, transforming transport, and healthy, happy communities. The panel were very clear they didn't want to drill down further than that, allowing a wide range of projects to come forward. The activity must take place within the national park, and the project must deliver benefit for communities. Moving through to the scoring phase and how the current panel have suggested we approach scoring for the applications. Everyone will go into, at all phases, into a 2-stage process with eligibility at expression of interest for medium and large grants, and that's similar to the eligibility check that will be done on the one simple application form for small grants. There'll be weighted scoring along with the current panel preference for what's important to them. So they really highlighted that benefit to communities, the geographic area that the project will be delivered in, the equity, diversity and inclusion nature of the project, and how the project builds capacity in terms of skills and legacy were particularly important to them. The equity, diversity and inclusion will be weighted, and applicants will self-determine at application stage whether their project is explicitly aimed at working in that space, either wholly or partly. Moving on towards the delivery of the small grants, which they have suggested sit in the £500 to £5,000 category. For small grants, what is really different here is the rolling nature of these grants. They will be open continuously and they're incredibly light touch. Small grants will be distributed on the presumption to a yes, as long as they meet the basic eligibility and delivery requirements, which I already have highlighted. Looking at medium grants, and we're on slide 10, that's 5,000 to 50,000. Within the medium grants fund size, this is where the panel currently saw that the place of a new community panel could have good impact. And using the same process that was tested on the recruitment, selection and payment process for this first panel, all areas, demographics and communities will have a say in the projects that are approved for funding. Crucially, in this fund, they said match funding would be welcomed but not essential, and this allows communities and projects to deliver this funding without additional barriers. And this is the same principle that carries through into the large grants. Moving into the large grants, at 50,000 to 100,000. On that large grant piece, the innovation is twofold. On one hand, having a fund which can 100% fund at this level is rare. And secondly, the involvement of the public to be part of shaping decision-making, both online and offline. Crucially, this is not a public vote, as the co-design panel felt strongly that a popularity contest in an area with such a discrepancy of population density was not appropriate. So this provides the public with a more substantive input, and the charity involved will help us to shape what that looks like. For clarity, the community panel are able to take on board those comments or not with the input of those public comments. Moving on to a communications plan, which is not my forte. Brenna would speak much better to this, as I'm sure board are aware. The communications team have had a comprehensive plan in place on how they delivered the first phase of this project, and they now have a comprehensive plan on how they will support the process going forward so that we can deliver effectively. It has been tested and developed during this first panel phase, and the lessons learned from how that can be applied to the delivery phase. Highlights in particular will be repeated are both the physical, i.e. postcards, events and print media, and online, social and website, using that two-phased approach. Looking through to slide 7 on the engagement and events, again, others will speak better to this, but particularly in there's a dedicated engagement team which we'll be delivering alongside the grants team. And excitingly, that ensures that the grants team can get on site to give applicants bespoke in-person and local support for their ideas. The panel are also interested in the recruitment of community champions to help flagship the fund and make sure it's spoken to in a local way. And the engagement team also have some ideas that they've tested in gamification and the delivery of that. So that's an ongoing piece of work. Thanks for your time. I'm going to hand back to Ailey to wrap us up.
Thanks, Bridget. So after all that, which I appreciate is quite a whirlwind run through of 3 months of quite intense co-design, board are invited to review the updated risk register, identify any gaps in coverage which require additional risk recognition and or mitigation action, and to agree the overall approach to the future of this piece of work. The adoption of clear set of risks and mitigation actions agreed by board has previously proved a successful approach in managing this project thus far. The risk register and risk management actions are proposed to again be used as a key tool in support of the grants team as they take this fund from design into operation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ellie and Bridget. Now, any questions or comments from members? First, Derek Ross, then Hannah Grist. Derek.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's on page 16 of 16 on the risk register, number 18. It says there will be follow-up remunerated opportunities for evaluation that the panel members may wish to apply for. Can you please expand on that?
I'm happy to take that one if that's helpful. So as part of the Cairngorms 2030 process, we have a full evaluation suite. So on Wednesday evening, the co-design panel were given the options for that. So that includes options for evaluation via interviews or written pieces, working really closely with our knowledge and evaluation manager, which I think is his title, so that they are limited to 5 hours total between each. Not every member will take that up, but it's a key part of that evaluation process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah Grist, followed by Anne Ross.
Thanks, convener, and thanks to both of you. I've obviously been sat on the advisory group as well, so I've seen quite a lot of detail about that, and there's a huge amount of work that went in there in a very short time period. So, yeah, congratulations for that. I also just wanted to comment on, having observed that, the kind of amount of thinking, care, very reflective nature with which this whole process has been managed, which I think it really does showcase the best of participatory democracy. I also want to congratulate Involve and the team members there, because they've done an incredible job, I think, at managing that, and have been very open to feedback and iteration and changing that as it went. And so I think my question then, moving on to, I think, risk 17, is that you mentioned that potential loss of momentum, and obviously the timeline shows that to mitigate that, we're accelerating straight into delivery phase, which I think is very positive. Just because we talked about before, are Involve still going to be involved in the delivery phase? And hoping so, is that something we can just continue through to make sure that there's continuity, not only for the team, but for that third party, given the timeline that is ever encroaching?
So thank you, first of all, for really positive feedback. So Involve's specific expertise isn't necessarily in fund development. We have that expertise in-house very helpfully. So they're not going to be involved in that element. From the first contract, there is that they have their own evaluation piece that was part of the original contract, so that will be ongoing. You are completely right. The timeline is it's going to be great, but so we're open to including them, but it would be a separate contract for full clarity.
Thank you. Questions from Anne Ross, followed by Duncan Miller, Paul Gibb, Lauren McCallum and Eleanor McIntosh. So Anne.
Thank you, and thank you for this paper and the work that you've done. How are you going to identify the community champions?
Thanks, Anne. That hasn't been fully decided yet, but one of the options would be to look to the current panel and whether they would be interested in taking the piece of work forwards, and or other members that wanted to come forwards. Ailey might have some additional on that.
The other thing we've retained as a baseline is those that actually expressed interest but were unsuccessful at the original co-design panel, and we took advice on making sure that we were able to legally retain their data for that purpose as well. So we have that as a very chunky 250 minus the current number baseline.
Thank you. Duncan Miller.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a question about the decision-making panel. I was just wondering if you'll be kind of looking for people to join the new panel with like some areas of expertise on some of the core themes. You know, for like example, one of the core themes is the way land is managed and used to benefit nature. So I was just, will there be people in that panel with land management skills? Just wondering that.
That's a great question. Thank you. So we are aiming to use a very similar recruitment method to which we used for the co-design panel, because that broadly ensured success. As you can see, the number is lower than the co-design panel, so each of the people will have to do a little bit more heavy lifting in terms of the specific demographics, geography, and experience that they bring. Very crucially, the panel are not being recruited for expertise in itself, specifically expertise in fund grant making, but we would also retain the ability to bring in expert advice if the panel felt it was lacking. I think, and particularly on specialist topics, I think that would be one that would be well used.
Thank you. Paul Gibb next, followed by Lauren McCallum, Eleanor McIntosh, Russell Jones and Jackie Brereton. Paul.
Great, thank you, Convener. I've got two sets of questions, if that's all right. First of all, on the paper that we read last night, and then on the slides from this morning. And just preempt, start. I acknowledge there's been a lot of work done and a lot of effort and quite at pace as well. So, but I'm just going to apply some scrutiny. So I'm just focusing on those types of questions. You said that risk 13 you might take out, which was about dominant voices. And I wonder if it might be worth keeping it in, because when it comes to the decision making, when applications are submitted, you might still have dominant voices on the panel who might influence strongly a particular application. So
Yep, I think that's a very good point, Paul. We've taken it out of the risk register at the moment in terms of the co-design panel, but you make a good point in terms of transferring that risk into the delivery phase to make sure that we're still recognising it as a feature of what the new panel that we're yet to see may be. So happy to pick that one up and include it.
Thank you. Just a few more on the paper. So match funding from other park funds is a potential which indicates some overlap with existing fund streams. It was more a query. I thought the intention was to set up a funding pot that might be on its own unique and separate from other Cairngorm National Park funding. Am I right? You can actually now do that?
This one is set up specifically underneath those 4 themes of Cairngorms 2030. There are no other large-scale open funding opportunities within Cairngorms 2030 specifically for those themes. There's smaller kind of tender opportunities, but not on this scale. In terms of match funding, technically, yes, there could be match across. Bridget and the team would retain control of all Park Authority funds in the same way that they always have. And for the second part, I might be handing to David.
Yep, I think at the moment it's difficult always when you're designing a fund to anticipate the kind of projects or which specific projects might come forward to apply. And so I think at the moment it's worthwhile keeping our minds open to the potential of the fund. While you're quite right, the fund has been developed as a unique specific fund able to support projects within this particular envelope. There may well be projects that come forward that have some potential overlaps into other funding streams. So, for example, Bridget and I also manage annually the community-led local development funding that we receive from Scottish Government that the Cairngorms Trust administers, and there's the potential for some community projects to either come in phases, perhaps to this fund for a small grant, and then in future into one of the other funds that might build on that small grant for a second phase of work. So I think while we're still not having sight of the type of projects that might come forward, it's worthwhile keeping our minds open to the potential for funding to be used either uniquely for projects only funded through the Communities Fund or it funding part of wider projects.
Thank you. I'll combine these 2 last questions on the paper from last night together. So it is possible for applicants to claim or apply for funding if they're outside the park. I guess the question is how far away and what sort of examples do you have in mind? And the other part to that question is that panelists may also apply. How is this managed? If they did apply, would they have to declare an interest, and are they involved in any of the selection process?
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I can take that one. So yes, we would allow applications from out with the park, but deliverability would mean that they would need to be delivering within the park for the benefit of the communities of the park. So I think we could look at maybe large-scale organisations that might have an interest in delivering a project here, and they might choose to deliver part of their project within the national park for the benefit of those communities. So hopefully that answers that part of the question. And the second part of the question, apologies.
Conflict of interest. So panelists may apply, and if they did apply, do they have to declare an interest?
Absolutely, yeah, to take that one as well. Specifically, we have a conflict of interest policy, which I think we would carry forward into this panel. It works very well for Cairngorms Trust. Many members sit on that panel and make decisions, so we would use a similar declaration of interest at all stages about, I guess, similar to you guys as well. Yeah.
Can I ask then about the paper that we received this morning? Sorry. So we received some slides this morning. Thank you very much. They do actually answer a lot of the questions that I asked at Audit and Risk last week. And so the panel will meet 5 times to consider the medium grants on 5 occasions, and on 2 of those occasions they will also consider the larger grants. But there's a presumption to say yes to the small grants, which is between 500 and 5,000, of which there could be 150, which is £750,000. How does the board say no to those?
That's a great question. So on the first point, one of the reasons was actually ourselves putting the cap on the small grants project. It was mostly on capacity for delivery, and I think the finance team would have perhaps had kittens if we hadn't put any form of cap on that, and that's simply a processing element, and it's 50 per year. So that cap is almost fairly natural. So that's 150 total throughout the programme. On the how do the panel say no? It's one of the key parts of being part of a panel or a board such as yourselves. Saying no is part of that, and part of that element will be part of the training that we're putting in for the panel via Bridget and the team. I'll let Bridget speak a bit more detail on.
Yeah, Paul, just clarify the nuance of the question. I think it's around how they would say no to a small grant if they had. Is that your presumption? Yeah.
Yeah, so they're meeting 5 times to assess the larger grants.
Larger and medium.
There's a presumption to say yes to smaller,
Small.
but are they emailed a summary of the grants and they can say, no, I don't like that, or do they meet to assess those?
Okay, I understand the nuance now. Thank you for clarification. The presumption is that if they meet eligibility and they meet deliverability, that they will have a yes, and that the panel, when they meet, will then have a précis of what has been approved and what is in pipeline to be approved. If they feel during that timeline that projects aren't delivering, or they're not seeing the projects they want, they would have some influence over the eligibility. But this is the panel have made this decision that they just want a presumption to yes.
On that deliverability point, it's worth highlighting that if Bridget and the team believe that a project is entirely undeliverable, that would then be deferred to the next grant meeting with that presumption towards yes, with this is what we've had, it hits eligibility criteria, but we believe it does not hit that deliverability criteria for this reason, and then it would be up to the panel for that.
So can I just check on that then? So for a small grant, up to £5,000, officers of the park, following the guidance that's been set out on eligibility, will approve and provide then a list to the panel of those grants that have been approved. Okay, understand that. So it just ties on to the next question, which was on slide 7 regarding constituted groups. So it says that there will be a preference to groups that have not participated before. Do the groups who are applying, do they need to be constituted, or could it just be any individual?
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, we can take applications from individuals and constituted and unconstituted groups. The grants team would work really hard with any group that's not constituted or doesn't, or an individual. Some mitigation we've had in the past is working with a third-party charity, maybe a development company, who might take the financial responsibility for that project. So, for example, if there was an individual that wanted to deliver a project within a specific community council area, the community council might be the delivery partner in terms of financial. So I think we've got quite an open way of working, but equally quite a risk appetite for trying to allow people who haven't got those constitutions in place to still move forward with a deliverable project.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that was really where I wanted to go, because most groups, and I'm in a small group in Aboyne at the moment, and we're not constituted, and we're going through the Mid-Deeside Community Council. They're constituted and they've applied for loads of grants, and I wouldn't want for them to be disqualified because they've got a history of applying for grants, because lots of small non-constituted groups go through that channel. I have one observation and one question left, sorry. So the observation, it's just a bit picky really, but I can't help myself. You've got 150 possible awards on the small scale grant, maximum if it was £5,000 to £750,000. You've got 3 possible awards for £50,000, that's 150. That takes you to 900. And you've got 2 at 100,000, that takes you to 1.1 million. The pot's $1 million. So couldn't help myself, sorry. So this final question, what is the cost to date in terms of the facilities and the staff and the panel, and what is the projected cost for the term? So we've got $1 million for the pot. The budget that we've set aside to administer this, are we within it, and do we know what that overall figure is? Thank you.
So I appreciate that what you're highlighting there is the potential worst case scenario. We are anticipating that the panel are going to have some tricky choices to make. Communities in the within the park area are incredibly ambitious and do some really wonderful things. I'm almost glad that we don't have to make these decisions because they are going to be some quite tricky choices as part of that. And that was another reason for that phasing of those small grants as well as our capacity for delivery. The second question was specifically around the finances of remuneration and things like that. I don't have the direct details specifically to hand, but I believe we could follow up with those.
I guess just from this is now relating to the risk. Are we within our envelope for spend on the
Yes.
administration of this, and will we remain in that?
Yes, we will be remaining within the spend. From our projections, particularly for this panel, we very much overestimated what the cost of the panel would be, specifically around those additional costs like travel and any potential remuneration for dependent care, and our cost came in way under what we anticipated those being, so there remains flex within there, and we do have, we're well within our engagement budget on that piece.
Grant, do you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, Paul, just on one of the points you make, because I think it's one that we just need to make clear around. I think that we'll need to keep a close eye on the small grant side of things, in that if there are 50 grants in the first year at £5,000 and £250,000 been spent, I think we're going to have to do a review on an annual basis to make sure that, because you could end up using the whole fund quite quickly if you have some big applications, some medium applications, and all the other ones. Now, that is if everything went at a certain scale, which I suspect it won't happen. But I think probably at the end of the first year, we need to have a review as to how many of the small grants have actually come through at what value, how much have come through at medium grants, how much have come through at large, how much is left in the pot, and whether there's then a rejigging of some of those priorities around that in terms of how many small grants you might take in future years. So I think there's probably a bit of a review at the end of each year to make sure we're not, if you like, for want of better words, blown most of the budget very early on across quite a lot of different projects. So I think that's probably a key one for us as a review after year one.
Thank you. Sorry, briefly, David. Yeah.
If I may just follow that up as well, I was wondering whether to come in on that point. You're quite right, Paul, to kind of raise the arithmetic and the numbers in front of us. Just highlight as well that Bridget and the team and ourselves, we do have a lot of experience of running multi-year grant programmes, going back to the old leader programmes as well, which operated over 5 years. And so we will be looking, just as Grant said, very closely in terms of monitoring the level of uptake that the fund has, the number of applications themselves that are coming through, and continuing to monitor how many applications and the total value at each of those 3 tiers in order to, it's as ever with a grant fund, it's a really knife-edge balance, because we've got 2 years over which we want to deploy the funding that we've got available, and equally we don't want to overcommit those funds either. So it's that continued monitoring over that extended period of time of both the uptake of the fund itself and how the funding is looking as if it's going to play out. So we'll be keeping a close monitoring of that, as well as Ailey's saying, the monitoring of the side costs of running the project as well.
So well done, Paul, in covering so much ground. And obviously, fresh questions, please, on ground that hasn't been covered. And we have questions from Lauren McCallum, Eleanor McIntosh, Russell Jones, Jackie Brereton, and Jiva Blackett. Lauren.
Well done. This is a massive piece of work, as we've said, and it's amazing to see it be, pulled together at such scale and pace. So just want to say congratulations, because, participatory democracy is what everybody wants, but it is incredibly difficult to deliver. And I think as we've just had this discussion, that's pretty clear. I've worked in the NGO space, applying for grants for many years, and I think I just wanted to kind of maybe a couple of comments and then some questions. Really like obviously there's some big risks with the small grants, but just how what's the word, the barriers for entry are, because I think it is really, really difficult. I guess that my comment on that is just how we then get into those groups that we really want to reach. And I think that is what's going to be really important for the panel, for the grants team, because I really do think our success is going to be on that. So I guess one of my questions is, have we got a bit of a kind of a plan for that? And then my next question is just about capacity for you guys. There's going to be a lot of coaching and a lot of hand-holding, I imagine, if this is actually what we're trying to achieve. So my question would be around about capacity and kind of foreseeing that as a bit of a risk, because if the phones are non-stop, you know, how are we going to manage that? Thanks.
Great questions. Thanks, Lauren. So on the first point on how we reach the communities that we're aiming to reach with this point, one of the key parts that the panel brought up themselves actually was on that comms front, and very much using that as a way of showing that this is for you. So part of that's some of the very visible social media we've already had around that. Part of that's the partnership work we've developed within this as well. And part of that's also those community champions we talked about there earlier, in terms of that not just being communities of geography, those communities of interest as well. We're not the only project working in this space within Cairngorms 2030, so we are planning on heavily working with the fellow staff as well on that, specifically, you know, where some of the transport projects have been working with disabled groups, that type of thing, and very much heavily leaning on those as well. The second part of the question was about capacity for delivery. So again, whilst it's myself and Bridget sitting here, we do also have the engagement team, so the 4 engagement staff, which are going to be a really key part of delivering this, specifically through those events. One thing we didn't actually mention earlier was the ability to lie for specifically the small grants, being able to apply at the event, any of the current roadshows that we're already running with this bolted on as a really key kind of workshop space. We've also got Bridget and the grants team who are absolute pros at what they do. So if you want to come in on any of that part.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I think it's really important to highlight that capacity, because we in the grants team do always try and have a positive destination for every applicant. If we say no to our funding, we want to give people other options or come back with better applications or a different application. So that will be a really key part of our delivery. So as Ailey highlighted, I think working with the engagement team is incredibly key on that, getting the grants team out on the ground, working with people really early to bring in good applications. We used to refer to it as the animation phase in European funding, quite a catchy title. So be out there working with people to help them get really good grants through to us. And I think I'm really conscious, especially with businesses and farmers and people who are making money from their time rather than volunteers, who are obviously important, to make sure that they're getting really good good feedback and good help really early on, so that they're able to progress their applications really swiftly.
Very briefly, yep.
Just a part with the community champions, I think another idea that I've seen work quite well, I guess it's the showcase, but just having those targeted things. So, you know, maybe going down to the Shinty or up the hill, or, you know, at these kind of, you know, really there's Thrive here in Ballater at the end of the summer, with the mountain bike community. So really kind of targeted events with different communities would be good to see.
Thanks, Lon. Eleanor McIntosh.
Yeah, thanks. I know we know the sound is not good in this hall, but I'm really struggling with some of the speaking. So can we remember to talk into the microphone, please? I've got 3 points, I think. The first one is, are we going to do an evaluation on our other grants delivery when we evaluate this project? So we're not just saying that this project has been, for example, a great success, but I would like to see why it's a bigger success than the way we do grants currently. Because to my knowledge, and I will declare an interest here in that I'm a trust member, being the link between the trust and the board, I've not been aware of any complaint as to how that system works. And I take on board that we've made a commitment to the lottery to try something new and deliver something new, but I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you get where I'm coming from. My second point is, there's mention on the slides about grants, the big grants, the 100,000. going out to some sort of public consultation or thought process. I really don't get the point of that if it's not a voting system. I think that's a huge risk to us. And I really think we should think pretty carefully before we go down that right line. And my third point is this new panel that are going to be selected, and I take Duncan's point, there needs to be experience in there. Are they going to be visible? Because they definitely need to be visible this time. And when they're being recruited, they need to be made aware that they are likely to become the face of that grants. That's my 3 points.
Great questions. Thanks, Eleanor. I might hand over to Bridget for the first question on the Cairngorms Trust and current fund evaluation.
Thanks, Eleanor. I think I'll just sort of speak a little bit to what I feel this process is and what we measure success against. So I think in the funds that we deliver through CLLD, community-led vision these days, and through the other grant processes that we currently have a hand in, we already have the outcomes that we're trying to meet, and those tend to be set by whomever we've had the money from, or whether they sit alongside Park Plan. I think within this process we'll be measuring not just against what the money does in communities, but also the process by which the money goes out. So some evaluation of journeys taken by people who received the money rather than did they do what they said they were going to do. But absolutely, I think that has to sit alongside us monitoring what we currently are successful at, alongside what the successes of this project are. And then I think at the end of that process, the two monitoring systems should really help influence how we deliver things in the future. Will this be a perfect process? Will it be a better process? We don't know yet, but I feel that we're getting into the deliverability of it now. But yeah, certainly evaluation needs to sit alongside and broadly across both pieces of work. One of the aims of C2030 is to embed some of that learning into the wider park authority and to build our skills to deliver things differently in the future. Some of that might fall out through Cairngorms Trust, etc. But I take your point that Cairngorms Trust are delivering in a really similar way, maybe to the medium grants. And I think the panel have reflected that they feel that's a good system in terms of that medium-sized grant system that feels comfortable for communities, and that's potentially why they've borrowed the idea from there.
Before Ailey comes in, just to follow up and build on what Bridget said, because I've been thinking a lot about the evaluation and picking up on Eleanor's point about that. How will this fund operate, and how does that compare with what the Cairngorms Trust already does? And I suppose for transparency, I should make clear that I am the Vice Chair of the Cairngorms Trust as well, so I've got a bit of a collective interest on both sides. I think it's the evaluation of this is really going to be fundamental, and what the differentiation is between what this fund might end up delivering and how the Cairngorms Trust works. I think there could be learning both ways, in that the Cairngorms Trust was set up as a charity 10 years ago. I think it was the first of the 20 local action groups in Scotland to incorporate as a charity, and it had already therefore innovated in the way that group went forward. It's been a charity now for 10 years. By the end of this fund, it will have been a charity for 12 years. So I think there's an element of, in the evaluation, the Cairngorms Trust also thinking about what it might learn from what happens in this project, and it might be able to evolve a little bit, and that will be interesting. But equally, I think there might be some sort of vindication or support for what the Cairngorms Trust does through, if the medium grants comes out to be, broadly speaking, what the charity operates, then that vindicates that piece of work and also gives a bit of legacy going forward as well, because some of the projects may continue on a legacy basis through the trust, and that's an open question. But I think that evaluation point is really, really important that we continue to look at.
I believe your second point was about the public element, the public consultation element. The co-design panel felt really strongly that if we're limiting decision making to 11 people, that they really required the ability to have input from wider areas. with 11 people, we will not have the ability to have one person from every town or village within the national park. So having that ability to have that input from the public, even if the panel then choose to ignore or go against that decision, was really important. Crucially, that's not a public vote. And it's not that, but it does keep that, and it really delivers on that transparency point, keeping what they are doing really transparent. That speaks to the will the panel be public question, which is yes, and it's one of the reasons that is such a distinct from the current panel. The co-design panel, as part of that element, were that bit more anonymous. When you are distributing money, your full name is available, and that will be clear as part of that recruitment as well.
Sorry, I didn't really pick up on the answer about the public consultation, how that would work. I don't.
So that'll be working twofold. One is that in the roadshow events, those large grants will be open and available for anyone attending that event to be able to comment on or provide input on. The second one is an online element of that as well. So the ability for, say, if the roadshow in that series of the roadshow and the public event happens to be in Granton, that then doesn't work against an applicant from Blair Athol who may not have the capacity to travel to Granton to be able to comment on an application that they are there. So the element of that is really key is that the public are able to be involved and have input, but the final decision rests with that decision-making panel.
Yeah, I'm just going to come back and say I still think that needs a lot more thought, and I think that should be a high risk to us as a board.
We can definitely take that on board. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Moving on to final questions in the session from Russell Jones, Jackie Brereton, Jiva Blackett and John Kirk. Russell.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be quite brief. I think Eleanor, actually, the first part of her question probably asked what I was going to ask in a much better way than I would have asked it. So thanks for that, Eleanor. And that's probably been covered. This is in no way a criticism. It's probably just me. As Eleanor was saying, I kind of struggle a bit. Part of me thinks, so what's different here? And I don't know who's supposed to apply to this. And is there, probably it's me. But if you covered that with Eleanor, I was going to ask about, following up on Paul's question about the panels being paid. Does that come out of the £1 million pot? No, that's not covered in that. And we seem to be paying this next panel as well. Is this a road that we're going down that we're going to start paying everyone that sits in these panels? Because, I mean, I'm personally a bit uncomfortable with that. I mean, I sit in the Highland Lag, as you know, David. I mean, I'm the council representative on that. And there's people from all over the Highlands on that. If we have a central meeting, they get paid expenses. Apart from that, to my knowledge, people don't get paid for that. So I'm not too sure why we're going down that road, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate that point, Russell. And as you say, that there's a number of there's 20 lags across Scotland that are working on that basis. There's other fund making bodies that distribute grants that again are working on that voluntary basis. I think an integral part of this project, and it's sorry, before I get into that, I'll track back one stage and give an absolute that no, we are not looking to evolve in a way where we are recompensing people for their participation in every group like this. It's been adopted in this case because, as part of Cairngorms 2030, one of the approaches to the overall programme is to encourage people into community participation who, until this point, had not been getting involved. So it's to try to find different audiences, and Ailey will express this better than I can, and so can correct me a little bit when I finish speaking. But we have really been trying to bring a different group into, in this case, the design of a funding panel who have not been involved in this situation before. And in this case, we have been offering recompense for time in order to try to overcome that barrier, that in terms of if people are fine who are time poor and can't find other ways of participating in voluntary groups like this because perhaps they are in a low income area or because they've got other costs that they're having to cover as part of their participation in groups. We're taking this as an exemplar of what difference does it make? And it will be part of the evaluation. What difference does it make to offer some recompense for time? And we will evaluate that as part of the overall project. We've put in place a policy that is a controlled document that does look at the justification for paying people for their time in certain voluntary activities, and that does help narrow down the number of times that we have been doing this. But we are going to look at it quite closely and evaluate it, and that is part of an integral part of the whole approach to Cairngorms 2030, is attracting new people into that public space. And we will see whether that's been successful or not. What have I missed, Ailey?
No, it was actually more of a less evaluative and more kind of colloquial point, is that several members of the current panel highlighted that had we not been remunerating, they would not have been able to be part of it. And specifically, they come from that group of parents of young children. And which is a classic group that is incredibly difficult to engage with, mostly on that time poor front. And I was really delighted that we had several members of this panel who did have young children and had a really fantastic input from that perspective. And if you would like a visual of the panel, it's on the final slide on your handout.
Thank you. Jackie Brereton.
Thank you. I'm excited about this, and I think this has shown such an innovative process, and it's right that we're actually having this in-depth discussion about it, I think. Just a couple of questions for clarity, and I think Bridget might have answered this inadvertently, but we've talked a lot about that this is for individuals, groups, charities, but can I just clarify that it's open to businesses, cooperatives, KICs, it's open application for anybody with a good project. And just a question about the existing co-design panel. So there's a huge amount of work gone into supporting and developing that panel as a mechanism. And I wonder what the plans are. Are there any plans for the role of that panel going forward? I know some of them may get involved in the other panels, but as a panel, what happens next for them? But also, have you noticed any outcomes for the individuals? You've mentioned the fact that we've been able to get people who otherwise wouldn't have been included. Have you noticed any or heard any other outcomes for the people involved that we can build into the evaluation of this project? Thank you.
I'll let Bridget handle the first question and I'll handle the second.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, just to clarify, we're looking for applications from everybody within the national and outside the national park under those themes. So yeah, I think it's really important that businesses are able to apply, KICs, etc., because they're a huge part of our community. Farming community, for example, are small business owners and often solo deliverers. So yeah, very important that they can get this funding.
On the outcomes for the panel itself, fairly quickly after their final meeting, which was obviously on Wednesday night, so we don't have anything firm at this point. To be clear, they have done what they were tasked with delivering and have been paid to deliver, other than the evaluation element, which is separate. So the answer I have is actually somewhat more colloquial for you here. We've got several different examples of people using this as an opportunity to further their own interest in community development or others. One, we have, keep an eye out in the Strathy, we have one of the panel members who'll be doing a park talk on behalf of us, talking about her experience and how she's folding that into her own business as a young business owner. I was actually nearly in tears on Wednesday night because one of our older participants was reflecting just at the end about how this has been so good for her and her brain, and she'd felt she'd actually had beneficial health outcomes from feeling useful again, and I'm using that from her own words, which was a fairly emotive element of part of that. So in terms of anything formal, I don't have a formal answer for you on that, but we do have that much softer touch legacy piece that was actually a really key part. That's a really key part of this going forward. A lot of them talked about having never thought about how in depth this is as a sector, and how they'd learned a lot from that as well. Specifically highlighting how much they'd learned from Bridget, which was really lovely to hear.
Thank you. Could I so in terms of the role of that panel going forward, does their work just finish Okay. But
Yeah.
there may be other opportunities for individuals.
For the recording, there's no formal role going forwards, but there may be opportunities if they chose to take those up.
Thank you. Final two questions from Jiva Blackett and John Kirk. Jiva.
Thank you, convener. I've got two questions. One is on the waiting for grants and one is on the comms. Being rather parochial here, I'm ever conscious that this side of the park doesn't benefit from Highlands and Islands Enterprises generosity, and we have to deal with Scottish Enterprise if we can. And being the chair, with my other hat on as chair of Mar Area Committee, we've had to cut our area grants to 18,000 this year for the whole of Mar. So this is really welcome. And I just wonder if the fact that we are in a different enterprise zone in particular is going to be part of the weighting that's given to the grant allocation, i.e. what other opportunities do communities have? You know, we don't get wind farm money in the national park, a lot of other people do. So there's a particular part of Aberdeenshire that really I think is pretty hard done by. Anyway, and then on the comms side, I noticed that on slide 13 it talks about publications and press and media. The deadline for the Ballater and Crathie Eagle, because the Community Council covers Crathie too, is next Tuesday. It will come out at the end of July, beginning of August, and I think it'd be quite good if you were ready, if you could put something about the grants in. I know sometimes the National Park does put a write-up in, and it would just give people here a heads up to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Jiva. I'm sure we'll use every opportunity possible to pick up on that first point. David? Or...
Do you want me to start? Or were you...
I've got copious notes, David. Thank you, Jiva, for highlighting that. Really appreciate it, because I think it's something that particularly in a lot of our decision making really comes to the fore about which areas do and don't attract particularly wind farm money and local funding. So thank you for highlighting that. In the timeline, there is a portion of time that will be given to training and onboarding for this new panel. And I think certainly a geographic and understanding of other grant funding that is available, in particular things like HIE and other standard funds, which are out with the control of the National Park itself, will form a good part of that. And thank you for highlighting it. It's really appreciated.
Thank you. And a final question from John Kirk.
Same as Jiva, with the Nethy, we would be quite good if we got something, and she's about to go to print in the next week, 10 days, or by the end of the month anyway. Just one quick question. Consultants, I presume that's not coming out of the fund, is it? Any consultants that's used?
Can I clarify whether you meant the consultants fees for the work we've done thus far, or you mean if people apply for consultancy fees?
Well, I presume if the new panel want to use consultants to get questions, you know, where does the fund come for that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's not coming out of the £1 million. So any costs of the panel are out with the scope of the £1 million.
Right, thank you very much, members. As Jackie was saying earlier on, this paper really did deserve the considerable attention we've given it, given all the opportunities and the potential reputational risks. So having reviewed the risk register and considered and noted the concerns that have been expressed, is the board content to agree the overall approach to this piece of work?
Agreed.
Consent. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to have a comfort break, 5 minutes. So we'll resume at, well, 5 minutes plus, 11:25. Thank you.
Something you might do with a stretch of the leg.
moving to paper 3, strategic tourism infrastructure. This is for discussion. Is it? Oh, right, okay, right, try again. Right, so we're on item 7, paper 3, strategic tourism infrastructure. So again, this is for discussion, and the board is being asked to note the progress towards delivery of the objectives contained in the Strategic Tourism Infrastructure Development Plan. The paper is being introduced by Colin Simpson, Head of Visitor Services and Active Travel. Colin.
Thank you, Sandy, and good morning, members. I just wanted to start with a little bit of a recap on why we have this plan in the first place. And on the one hand, it's very useful from our own perspective just to have a whole series of priorities, and that helps with how we disperse the various funding related to tourism infrastructure. But members will maybe recall that the Scottish Government launched a scheme a number of years ago, the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. And as part of that, they then tasked all local authorities and the 2 national park authorities with producing a plan like this. And eligibility for their fund was dependent on us having that type of plan in place. So there was an external factor as to why we have this plan in place as well. As part of that, we were perhaps being a little bit speculative with some of the projects that we put in there, because we knew if it wasn't in there, we couldn't get it funded, and therefore it was better to have something in rather than not. And I think that comes out in the report, that when you look at what we have done, there's been some really good progress on some projects. There are some others that are maybe underway, but there are also some that haven't proceeded, and to some extent they are perhaps some of the more speculative ones that we put in. It would be nice to do some of these things, but various things haven't necessarily aligned to let them proceed so far. I think it's probably also worth just touching on one other factor, and this ties in with some of the discussions we had around motorhomes at previous board meetings. While most of the projects are site-specific things, where there might be a need for a car park or toilets or some sort of facility at a given location, we also recognise the need for a network of certain types of facilities across the park, but without it necessarily being the case that those had to be in any given location. So we do within this plan flag up the need for some networks of facilities as well, and we have been chipping away at trying to achieve that as well. So as you'll see from the document, section 6 gives a bit of a summary of progress, how we've managed to complete some projects, others are underway, some are not. And then there's a bit more detail in the table at the end on some of the individual projects, just so that people can see where we have got to with each of them individually. But that's really all I want to say by way of introduction, but happy to take any questions on any of it.
Any questions or comments on the paper? John Kirk?
It was just somebody said to me the other day about, you know, with cycle paths and everything else, which are brilliant, and, you know, we can't... but one of the problems is, if we cycle towards a bus station to park up our bikes, come back and some swine has nicked it. Have we thought of infrastructure for doing secure bike shelters?
The answer is yes, although it's not necessarily specifically through this plan. Part of the Cairngorms 2030 transport projects includes a whole range of different cycle-related infrastructure. Some of that is hubs in a number of the different communities around the park, and part of those hubs will include things like secure storage. So particularly at places where people might cycle to then pick up a train somewhere. So like Aviemore, there will be something close to the station there.
Thank you. Paul Gibb, followed by Mike Williamson.
Yep, thank you, convener. Probably just an observation and maybe some caution on 5 and 25. So the Ballater Transport Hub and also then the parking just east of the village. So we had a community council member here, but he has left. But it is a discussion at the community council, and principally all they would like, if you were to go for a walk just in the square at lunchtime, is the bus stop moved from the co-op to the side of the car park behind the Kirk. That's all they want. But the council doesn't have the money to do that small bit of work, so it's been bundled into this larger piece of work with Nestrans funding, which will create this hub. Just the point to note is that the hub potentially will reduce some of the parking because of the infrastructure that will be there. That's a concern. The project is taking an awfully long time and it doesn't yet have a completion date, and it's tied into this bus park. These are bigger projects. what's our involvement in that, and are we managing our expectations on delivery?
Okay, so thanks, Paul. A couple of things in there. I think, first of all, in terms of the hub, again, that's to some extent related to the Cairngorms 2030 project. So our transport team are involved with Nestrans and Aberdeenshire Council in the discussions on that. We're not directly funding the public transport element of it, but we are funding some of the other things around that. So cycle-related infrastructure, for example. It's probably worth also saying that the coach parking is seen to be a kind of slightly separate project to that. And the reason it's in this plan was actually at the request of the community here, because they had already attracted funding, done a feasibility study on it. But as I think you've touched on, the funding wasn't there to deliver it all at the time. So we did incorporate it in this plan because it did open the door to future funding. And I think that's tied up with a number of other developments. It's partly been related to the fact that there's a new cruise terminal in Aberdeen and the fact there are expected to be more coaches coming up, which will stop in Ballater, and they don't want the coaches necessarily parking up in the middle of the village. So the intention is to have a better drop-off point, and then the driver will take the coach out of the village to avoid further congestion. But I appreciate that there's further funding needed for that, and there's a bit of discussion going on at community level, I believe, about what other facilities should be incorporated within that. So should the coach parking include things like toilets or a welfare facility for the drivers, or should we encourage them also to come into the village? So that is part of the discussion we're involved with. Just as maybe a final brief point on that, the preferred location at the moment is, as you're probably aware, just to the east of Ballater itself and on the north side of the road. So we have suggested that they put a small path link through onto the Deeside Way, which would then actually give people a very convenient way back into the village if they did want to come in and make use of the facilities here.
Thank you. Questions in turn from Mike Williamson, Jiva Blackett, Anne Ross and Derek Ross. Mike.
Thank you very much. My question is not specifically about the paper, but just looking forward about the plan and its objectives and its deliverability. And are you in discussion with the planning team about the forthcoming LDP? And do amendments or tweaks need to be made to the local development plan in order to facilitate the ease of delivery of the plan's objectives?
We do work with the development plans team, and certainly the broader themes and so on that we have in here are also things that they're picking up on, you know, the need to provide facilities for visitors. I think perhaps that process is as much the other way as anything else. We will need to revisit this plan. It's likely to be one of our ambitions within the next National Park Plan that we revise this in the context of current circumstances, and some of that will be recognising what's come out of the local development plan consultation, because communities will be coming up with new ideas that maybe weren't there 3-4 years ago when we did this previously.
Thank you. Jiva Blackett.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Number 26 is a constant issue. The car parks at Balmoral are absolutely rammed every day. But a lot of people don't want to pay for their parking. So, you know, they may not be going into the castle part of the estate, but they're definitely walking up by the pyramids and things. The sides of the roads going up and, you know, up to the distillery are just absolutely rammed with cars the whole time, which makes access for delivery lorries, etc. Traffic management undertaken by Aberdeenshire Council. Can you tell me where we are with that, please? And how can the park help alleviate the problems around there, if at all?
So I think there's a limited amount we can do in terms of the actual traffic management, because that's very much a roads authority function. But there has, as you're aware, I think, been some yellow lining, for example, to try and stop people parking in certain areas. Where we think we can realistically help is one part that we've already done, and one that's hopefully still to come. We work with likes of Walk Highlands, who promote the route to the cairns quite significantly, and they actually amended their description to encourage people to go from the car park and across the suspension bridge. So that took a lot of the people off the Balmoral Road Bridge, which was one of the traffic issues, was that mix of pedestrians and traffic. And we also provided signposting for that route, and we've also worked with the estate on path improvements as well. The part that's now, in a sense, the broken link within that is after you come off the suspension bridge onto the South Deeside Road and then up the Distillery Brae. There's not a particularly suitable, well, there isn't a path there, to be quite frank, and we have had some discussions with the estate there about whether we might be able to provide an off-road path there. Those discussions have started, but we've not concluded anything as yet. Partly there are some challenges around the gradients, so to put in a path at current standards might involve quite a lot of zigzagging, which we would try and avoid if we can. But there are some.
Can I just come back? You mentioned double yellow lines. I haven't seen any traffic orders. Any traffic orders, they would come to committee, the council.
Apologies if it's not yellow lines, but my understanding from Aberdeenshire Council was that they had put in some kind of traffic orders around. Perhaps it's more of they've approached it in a different way. I haven't actually seen it myself. So
I think that's one for me to chase.
And I'll double check my facts on that. Apologies.
Yeah, I think we'll take that one offline. Followed by Anne Ross, Derek Ross, Russell Jones and Lauren McCallum. Anne.
Thank you. On the back of what Paul has said regarding Ballater and Crathy Community Council, he said that all that they were wanting regarding the transport hub, if I understood him correctly, was the bus stop sign moved. How closely are you working with the Community Council and listening to their wishes? Because if that's all they're wanting, I question why we're doing more. But at the same time, the hub going in, you said that there was concern regarding businesses, I think I picked up, that if there was, I'm going to call it central parking, it would affect the parking in Ballater and would affect businesses. How closely are we working with the Business Association, and what are we doing to mitigate any, and it's a matter of opinion until it's evidence-based, but what are we potentially going to be doing to mitigate any impact on the business by putting a transport hub in? Thank you.
I think the short answer on that is we're not. Bear in mind, this is an S-Trans and Aberdeenshire Council project, and what we're doing is saying we could add some additional cycling facilities related to what they're doing. We're not actually leading on the public transport project. That's a Council and S-Trans one. And they have had quite a bit of public consultation on it, and we've had our transport team along at that consultation, but we're not the lead on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Ross.
Thank you, Chair. As I've mentioned before, the government, the dual government growth deal has delivered an on-demand bus service in Murray called M-Connect. Can I ask how much liaison you've had with Murray Council and the M-Connect service, their transport service, about improving the tourist offer via M-Connect?
In terms of infrastructure, we haven't. Bear in mind, this is about capital infrastructure where you're creating a new physical asset. So this doesn't cover the costs of things like operating services, which is done through the partners' revenue budgets. But we do certainly work with them as part of the Cairngorms 2030 transport project. And on-demand transport's one of the elements that we've been looking at there. But in terms of this specific tourism infrastructure project, because there's not an infrastructure need there, it's a service need, it's not part of this work.
Thank you. Russell Jones, followed by Lauren McCallum and Hannah Grist. Russell.
Hey, thank you. Colin, it's about the parking at Glenmore. They say there's a parking plan and temporary parking at the hayfield provided at peak times. Are you aware of the plan, and do you know exactly how that works? I mean, are you still involved in that, as in are the parks still involved in that?
We are, yes. We, slightly separate to this, but we have a Managing for Visitors group that meets fortnightly, virtually it meets fortnightly right through the summer, and both Highland Council, who manage the roadside parking, and now manage the Forestry and Land Scotland car parks, and Forestry and Land Scotland themselves take part in these calls, and we quite often have separate follow-ups on Glenmore specific things. The tricky thing about the overflow car park is it's unpredictable until a couple of days before, because it is very much a weather dependent thing. If the sun comes out, the weather's lovely, lots of people go there, then they have to open up the overflow. So it is very much something where FLS and the council liaise, and they kind of react to that.
Who attends those meetings fortnightly from Highland Council?
It's normally Lewis Hanna.
Right, so it's nobody from the parking team then, no?
No. Although, to give Lewis his due, he's pretty good at...
On your mic, please, Colin.
Sorry. I know they're separate to those meetings. I know Forestry and Land Scotland and Highland Council do actually have pretty regular meetings about Glenmore parking. So we're not party to those direct discussions. They're more about the kind of day-to-day operation of it.
Passing messages to the parking team and actually getting anything done, they're different things, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Lauren McCallum.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to question around the number 30, around the network of motorhome facilities being medium. I thought that would have been high, Colin, because I know we're taking, if you take Abbeymoor, for example, if we're going to double yellow line up from the old bridge in, where a lot of camper vans are currently there, I totally get it, I understand. But if we're kind of starting to force people out, where are they going to go? Yeah, and then my other question was just around the, maybe the one for offline, but I would really like to discuss number 32 about the mountain bike path as well on Mealbuckle and where that's at. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. In terms of the motorhome parking, I think partly based on the board discussions that we've had over the last couple of months, if we were writing this plan now, we probably would be saying that motorhome one is high, although we perhaps weren't a couple of years ago. I think the other factor there is it is one where we have to be kind of very sensitive to. And in terms of what we've got in this plan, it's worth highlighting that this is more about, in a sense, publicly available infrastructure rather than funding business opportunities. So things like motorhome airs, we are working with likes of community groups to develop them for community benefit, but this isn't a fund that would fund an out-and-out commercial enterprise to create a campsite. So again, there's some kind of sensitivities we have to be aware of there.
Thank you. Questions from Hannah Grist, followed by Pete Cosgrove.
Hi, Colin. Just want to have a little bit more explanation about number 6, which is enhancing the EV charge point network, which again is like a medium priority. So my understanding is that Charge Place Scotland are decommissioning and now handing over to private owners of charge points. So where does that, bearing in mind the comment about business, where do charge points now sit in how we're managing them? And also, just informally, Charge Place Scotland pulling back has caused so many charges to now not be working or not be managed, and actually there could be a real challenge getting around the national park. So do we have any role in looking at that and thinking strategically about how that can, a very, I guess, active situation at the moment, be managed moving forward?
I think, if I'm honest, this is another one where we may have worded this slightly differently if we did so today rather than 3 to 4 years ago. At that time, Charge Place Scotland was still kind of seen as being the way forward, whereas I think what Scottish Government themselves have concluded, probably rightly so, is that there is now quite a mature commercial market out there and there doesn't need to be quite the same public funding input to things. However, that's not necessarily always the case in rural areas, which was partly why we had this in here. So we had in mind at the time partly that there was a UK National Parks project to put some EV charging into national parks right across the whole of the UK, and we did tap into that, and we worked with a couple of communities to get charging in Carbridge, in Nethy Bridge, and at Glenmore at the Reindeer Centre, because all of these were places with no provision at the time. And part of the Lochmorlock Beach car park project that we've been working on with Forestry and Land Scotland, it was considered not appropriate to put EV charging in there, but we're working with the community trust to put the EV charging into the visitor centre car park across the road from that. So with that, and I take the point about chargers not necessarily always being working, but with that, we're now fairly confident that effectively every significant community in the park does now have a charge point, albeit not necessarily always a working one.
Thank you. Questions from Pete Cosgrove, followed by Paul Gibb, then Mike Williamson. Pete.
Thank you. It's really a sort of a strategic question about the delivery of projects, which you, I think, quite honestly acknowledge as being mixed. Going forward, are there any strategic lessons that we should learn about the type of projects that get delivered versus those that don't? Because I'm sort of slightly worried reading this that we're raising expectations on delivery on tourism projects that are not always being met.
Yes, I think there's always something we can learn about getting that balance between kind of deliverability and ambition. And I think perhaps we partly erred towards the ambition side here, and partly that was because if a project opportunity did arise and yet the project wasn't in the plan, we knew we couldn't tap into the funding, hence the inclusion of some which were maybe slightly more ambitious rather than firm projects. I think the other thing probably that we would want to look at is maybe realising that things do change sometimes quite quickly. Much of this plan was written with rural tourism infrastructure funding in mind. Scottish Government paused that scheme for a while, which had a knock-on impact on whether projects went ahead, not just within our area, but right across the country. And that knock-on effect, to some extent, is still being felt. So perhaps we could be a little better at kind of covering, well, having a plan B perhaps would be a colloquial way to put it.
And Grant, if you want to comment.
Yeah, I suppose just in terms of post-park plan and sort of an update to this, I think we'll also need to be pretty clear about what we want to say about shovel-ready projects that can also be put towards any visitor levies that do eventually come in within different areas of the park. So it won't just be an RTIF side of things. I think we want to make sure we've got projects that are at the point where we can look for funding for them. But I think there's still always a slightly speculative bit to this, which is just trying to make sure that we have covered off, even if they are ideas at the time. I mean, a number of the ones that were put in here 4 or 5 years ago are likely to happen in the next period. It's just that they've taken that long, if you like, for some of the fog to disappear around them and actually get down to the brass tacks as to what they are. So it does sometimes take a bit of time for communities and other organisations to sort of agree what it is. Once a sort of idea of what they want to see, what it actually looks like on the ground, does take a bit of time to get there.
And Russell's looking to come in at that point. It was another point, right? Okay, in which case, Paul Gibb.
Okay, thank you. Shortly after I was elected, I met with the team up at Glen Shee, and they made just an observation to me that they hadn't been involved in a great number of projects with the park. So I just wondered if you could just reflect on some of the history of work with them. And is there anything, because I haven't seen in the last 3 years any projects that we've done at the ski centre. Is there something we could do to facilitate parking and transport in that area?
We have definitely worked with them. Again, it's one of those ones where our support would be for the wider publicly available infrastructure rather than funding their business activities. So the publicly available toilets there, which was an Aberdeenshire Council-led project, we also participated in that and put in £100,000 of the funding towards those toilets. There haven't been any transport or parking related ones, but that was a pretty significant project we did support there.
Thank you. Mike Williamson, then Russell Jones.
Thank you. Excuse me. I think it's quite interesting as something like 21 of the 33 actions have got parking involved in them. And it's just to raise a point, but it was just an event recently where the 4 major places for car parking hire were London Airport, London Heathrow, Edinburgh Airport, followed by Manchester, followed by, surprisingly, Inverness, are the 4 major places for car park, so for car hires. What they're saying is the number of cars that are electric vehicles that are getting hired is increasing all the time. And they are there was a conglomeration of businesses there that I think maybe we need to get back to you about how they invest in the infrastructure around about EV charging points and better signage for those EV charging points as well, Colin.
I think that's one of the ones that we know is very much an evolving market, and I think we have to certainly keep tabs on that, and perhaps need to be willing to change what we support if that's required. I think the other thing that we can do is, through some of the promotional activity that we do and other information that we provide, is just alert people to that network, because in some ways it was quite straightforward when Charge Place Scotland ran virtually everything. Now there's 4 or 5 or 6 different providers all operating in the park, and there are different ways of promoting all of them. So there may be a wee bit we can do around our comms activity rather than just our infrastructure investment to try and make that journey easier for people.
Is it okay to come back? I think what I found at that event was that there were investors there looking for investment opportunities in investing in the network, so to speak. So I think it's quite interesting.
Just very briefly on that point, I think we are certainly aware of that, and the discussions that we're having with the Community Trust at Glenmore just now are not necessarily about putting in a publicly funded charger, which is probably what would have happened a year or two ago, and it's maybe about helping to link them up with a commercial provider who might do it instead. So yeah, we do see that as potentially a way forward.
Thank you. And I think a final question on this paper from Russell.
Hey, thank you. Sorry, Colin, I meant to ask this the last time I was in the parking at Kincraig Bridge. It's medium priority. I mean, would you consider moving that to high priority, because it's at a bit of an impasse, as we know, and there is a meeting just in a couple of weeks' time that I think Adam's going to. But I mean, the River Spey is a core path, and access to it is getting more and more difficult.
Yes, I think it's definitely a higher priority now than I think we perhaps saw it being a couple of years ago. I think it's probably also fair to say there that at the time we wrote this plan, there was a thought from the estate that they might put in additional dedicated parking, and that was why that went into this plan as an infrastructure thing. I think what we're looking at just now is that may still be an option, but there's also a kind of wider parking and traffic management element that needs to be considered there. And I'm going to accompany Adam to that meeting in a couple of weeks' time, because we do see that as being a pretty high priority for the area. Yeah.
Right, thank you again, members. With that, is the board content to note the progress towards delivery of the objectives contained in the Strategic Tourism Infrastructure Development Plan? Sent, and thank you very much again, Colin. Moving on now to item 8, paper 4, election of board deputy convener and audit and risk committee chair. So this is for decision, and the board's being asked to agree the election timetable for both positions. Papers being introduced by Marianne Peter and David Cameron.
Thank you, Convener. The paper sets out approval from the board for the proposed timetable for the Deputy Board Convener and the Audit and the Risk Chair as per the standing orders. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? None. Thank you, in which case is the board content to agree the election timetable for Board Deputy Convener and Audit and Risk Chair? All round. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marianne, and thanks, David. Item 9, paper 5, committee minutes. The paper presents the approved minutes from recent committee meetings. The board's being asked to note the minutes of the Resources Committee and Performance Committee meetings. Is the board content to note the minutes as presented? Once again, thank you very much. Item 10, AOCB, none has been notified. Sorry, Grant.
Yeah, it was just to say formally that Ollie Davies will be leaving us for a different role at the end of August. We're started the recruitment for head of communications engagement, but I just wanted to put formally on note thanks to Ollie for all the work he's done over the past 5 years. I think you'll agree that our comms is in a very different place from where it was 5 years ago in terms of breadth and depth, and there's been a huge amount of work done, from new websites and a complete overhaul of all the social media presence to all the branding side of things and everything else that's been done over the past few years. So he will be missed, and we wish him all the best for his future career outside the park, but he certainly left a good legacy within the National Park over the past 5 years. So that's all I want to say.
Well, absolutely to second that, I think on behalf of the whole board, I'm not in a position to comment on the situation 5 years ago, but this is an exceptional team, led exceptionally. Again, we reflected earlier on the work that's been done around the fire bylaw, but in every other area, this has been a monumental area of work delivered brilliantly. So we wish Ollie well in his new move. Moving on to item 11, the date for the next formal board meeting. That'll be the 25th of November 2026. It'll be in person at the Lonach Hall, Strathdon. Thank you very much to those members of the public who've joined us on the live stream, and to all board members and staff. To anyone who's leaving us now, I'd like to wish you a great weekend. Thank you again.